This is Toledo Symphony Lab, a behind-the-scenes look at the world of classical music from WGTE Public Media and your Toledo Symphony. I'm Brad Cresswell. Joining me today are the Toledo Symphony's president and CEO Zach Vassar, principal second violin and artistic administrator Merwin Siu, and the TSO's marketing director Felicia Canny. Well, we are all about Beethoven today and about Brahms. We are talking about a program that's coming up this weekend, Saturday and Friday, January 12th and 13th. It's at 8 o'clock at the Toledo Museum of Art, Peristyle. We're going to hear the Beethoven Piano Concerto No. 5, the Emperor Concerto, and that stars the pianist Stewart Goodyear, who's been here a couple of times before. In fact, he's going to be calling in any minute, hopefully, fingers crossed. We're waiting for him to call in. We're going to chat about that. Also on the program, the Symphony No. 2 in D major by Johannes Brahms. You can find more information at the website, toledosymphony.com, or call up the box office, 419-246-8000. At the podium will be Giordano Bellincampi, very popular conductor here in Toledo. And so let's start off just by taking the temperature, first of all, because this is kind of a battle of the bees going on in this program. I just want to sample each of you. If we were having a celebrity smackdown, right, between Beethoven and Brahms, who would win? Merwin?
Well, I don't think Beethoven would be able to hear Brahms coming.
Good one. Good one.
So if there was a smackdown, I think I would go with Brahms in the cage match.
But if he could see Brahms, so say Brahms is coming toward him and he was looking up, who would win?
Well, that's an entirely different question. That takes us into a hypothetical I'm just not comfortable with.
Felicia, you want to weigh in on the topic?
Oh, definitely Brahms.
Definitely Brahms. Okay,
I'll
Zach.
just leave it at that.
I'm going to go for Beethoven. As much as I love Brahms, I think the old man would have taken him down in a cage match.
You think so?
Yeah.
I don't know. I mean, well, yeah, they're...
You're talking literal
Cage match, yeah. I mean, just imagine old Beethoven, grumpy, syphilitic. He probably would have still beaten up Brahms.
I have to say, I'm going to go for Brahms, not only for the sake of bringing us to a tie, but also for the fact that, Brahms, he was a rather slight man when he was young, but he grew, shall we say, as he got older.
He gained in stature.
Yes, he gained in stature. And I think that if it were the two of them, I think that Brahms could probably
I think it ended up 3-1. I think Zach is the only dissenter.
Wait, yeah. Merwin, are you switching?
No, I said that
said
Beethoven
Brahms?
wouldn't be able to hear Brahms coming, so
Gotcha.
Brahms
okay.
would win.
Okay, well then maybe I should say Beethoven.
Don't flip-flop.
Well, the point is that they're both equally amazing in their own right. But let's
pugilistic not being the right that comes to mind.
Wow.
We have all kinds of programming possibilities coming up here. The whole cage match series.
We wanted to do a New Year's Viennese masterpieces concert. This was never intended to elicit any visions of cage matches.
Yeah. Now I really wish that we had brought Bob Clemens in to do Brahms for us, because we've heard his Beethoven, so.
They might sound an awful lot alike.
Yeah, we'll have to save that for a future episode.
Well,
so
in the new year, we do have the old year and then the baby for the new year.
A baby
Cage
new
match,
year.
Right?
Yeah.
Do you guys know the cartoon?
Yeah.
I'm out in the cold here.
That's like a Rudolph cartoon, right? Isn't it? Or
I
something,
think so.
or the baby Baby New Year.
Yeah. An old man from
Old man time.
yesteryear.
old man yesteryear. He kind of looks like Brahms.
Yeah.
So you're
Very
saying
much.
Beethoven is Baby New Year and Brahms is old man yesteryear?
No, I think we'd have to flip-flop.
You'd flip-flop.
Do it the other way?
Flip-flop.
Yeah.
Baby Brahms versus old man Beethoven?
Yeah.
Yes. Oh, yeah.
Yeah,
That
that's
makes
sort of
more
how
sense.
it was. I mean, there's this, if we're going to talk about Brahms, there's this, legendary story. It's become part of classical music lore that Brahms was under the shadow of Beethoven. He wrote his Ninth Symphony, Beethoven did, and then Brahms took like 50, 60, 80 years to write his first symphony because he was so afraid of being compared to Beethoven. But his second symphony came along pretty quickly, and it's not one that we hear all that often. But what was the reasoning behind pairing this Brahms with this particular very popular Beethoven concerto?
Well, I think that when you're comparing the Brahms symphonies, the first symphony and the second symphony, the first symphony opens with this incredible statement, like, I am ready, I am here, these powerful timpani strokes. Whereas the second Brahms symphony starts almost in media res, like you have just the descending semitone, motive, and then you're off on the stream of the melody, so to speak. And it feels very comfortably Brahms, somebody who is very much comfortable in their own skin. And in a way, you're taking two compositions of composers who are very much comfortable in their own skin. At this point, Beethoven's Emperor Concerto, you're talking about somebody, Beethoven very much, kind of fully established in his middle period. And I think you could say a similar sort of thing for Brahms. And even though there's the mythology in a way that we talked about that forever links the two, and I think is legitimate. But in these two compositions, you see Brahms maybe separating himself a little bit from Beethoven's ghost.
I would agree with everything you just said, because for me, the handshake is Brahms' first symphony and its quotations of Beethoven's Ninth Symphony. By the time Brahms gets to Symphony Number 2, he's flying with his own wings, and he's writing his own music, which frankly sounds a lot more like the chamber music that came before it, the Brahms' First Symphony. For me, it's just an impossibly sunny symphony as well, and one that I feel like is overlooked. When you wrote only 4 symphonies, you can't say that any of Brahms' symphonies are overlooked, but the first is certainly famous. You'd probably argue as to whether 3 or 4 is the next most famous, and then 2 just ends up being this like 4th place finisher out of 4. But it's a fantastic symphony. Every time I listen to it, I've seen it with some of the great orchestras around, I'm just blown away by how outstanding it is. And by the end of the 4th movement, I'm ready just to fly out of my seat and say, this is the best Brahms symphony.
Yeah. What do you think, Felicia? Are you a Brahms fan?
I want to point out that Felicia has in front of her the scores to the complete symphonies by Johannes Brahms.
Really?
She does.
I don't own this. This is my husband's, but I did photocopy some of the first pages of the Second Symphony, and I have it plastered on my wall in the office.
Why is that?
Well, this symphony was first introduced to me when I was in college at BGSU, and at that time, I was one of not many oboe students at the school, so I played in almost all of the ensembles. And so, one rehearsal to the next, not very different. But one semester in particular, my future husband auditioned, made it into the Philharmonia, and which was great at that time because it was packed full of grad students. So we were very proud. And when you meet someone for the first time and you're thinking that, he might be interested in me, you have like this heightened sense of awareness. And
what was his instrument?
Trombone.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Trombone and oboe.
Yeah, we could play Bach conventions or
yeah.
So while we were getting to know one another, we were also diving deeper into Brahms' second in rehearsal, and it just kind of became like the soundtrack.
Wow. So when people say
romance.
It's our song, you're like, this 40-minute symphony. It's our song.
Oh, yes.
It's our
we should
symphony.
have worked that into the wedding somehow. Darn.
Yeah.
That's a long procession.
You have
We'll
to walk
just
very
crawl.
slowly. Yeah.
Well, I'll tell you, next time I play it on the air, I'll dedicate it to you two.
Oh, so sweet.
Yeah. Well, that's a great story.
Yeah. Well, stepping away from my personal connection to it, I just think it's so remarkable that it took Brahms over 20 years to write the first symphony and then like a summer vacation to write the second one. And, I mean, Merwin and Zach, you kind of touched upon that already, but I find human motivations very interesting. And for Brahms, the fact that he felt like he couldn't live up to Beethoven and he was afraid of failing, trying to live up to this expectation of writing this phenomenal symphony, I think is very interesting. And then only after he received praise for his first symphony, was he able to, let everything just flow and churn out the second one in no time at all.
Well, we're going to hear in a little bit here, Rachel Zeithamel and you, Merwin, are going to perform for us in the studio, something we have not done since the very first episode of the podcast when we had Damon Coleman come in. Mm-hmm. You guys are going to do that F.A.E. sonata. It's an interesting story.
Sure.
Behind that. But did you have something you wanted to say, Felicia? I feel like I cut you off there.
Oh, when Merwin kind of talked about the beautiful melodies from Brahms' second, my favorite of all is the first movement, the very beginning of it, how the three notes kind of draw you into this almost lullaby feel. Yeah. And then
Brahms was good at writing those.
I know. Yeah. He might have had a few. And then it really draws the listener in to the next really sweet melody, and right around measure 100 from the score right in front of me. No. It's the gorgeous melody that I have up on my wall, and it's like a swirling. It kind of reminds me of. Do you know the animated movie Anastasia?
I can't say I do.
There's this one scene that I always imagine, and she's in the ballroom dreaming of the people that she knew, people in her mind, and it's like swirling around her, and that's the music that's happening right around.
Yeah.
That section of the first movement it's gorgeous. It's so beautiful, and I think everyone's going to love it.
That's not the movie that you wanted for Christmas that your sister got, right?
No, Cinderella.
Cinderella.
They're very, very similar. One knows her family, one has forgotten.
Well, I remember from my music history days, when we talked about Brahms, the whole big thing, the thing that drew everybody's attention was this like love triangle between Brahms and
Schumann.
Robert Schumann, and well, not between Brahms and Robert Schumann, but Brahms and Clara Schumann, and of course her husband Robert, involved as Brahms' mentor. But I never felt it was clear to me what really was going on there. Does anybody want to weigh in on all of that? Because it seems like, did they, didn't they?
Maybe in a year. Maybe we want to weigh in on this in a year.
We might have a program devoted exactly to that topic.
Perhaps, really? As we think about this.
Really? What's it about?
I will say, in talking about Brahms symphonies, my understanding is that the first piano concerto started off as a symphony, and he was dedicating it to Clara Schumann. But then somehow the nervousness overwhelmed him, so he made it a piano concerto instead of a symphony. That's why it starts out so symphonic, and I think it's 5 minutes before the piano hits a single key.
Yeah. Okay. Is that your answer? Final answer?
I'm skipping the
tabled.
topic. Yeah.
Well, I will say that Brahms, some of the many things that Brahms is known for is his ability to kind of hide coded messages in his music. The F.A.E. sonata that you mentioned is actually something which references that, but not so much the D major symphony. So in a way, I think while I think it's your nose for his story is perfectly appropriate. I think I can maybe divert it a little bit to the F.A.E. sonata that we're about to play.
You might have missed a career in politics. That was some wonderful work there.
Well done.
It's just natural Canadianness.
Okay, to be continued.
Quota check. But
to be continued. As they say, roll the tape. We had you guys tape the F.A.E. sonata for us before we started doing the podcast. So let's just go ahead with that, and then maybe when we come back. We'll get Stewart Goodyear on the phone. Maybe, maybe not. Just depends on if we can get him to call in or not. Merwin, can you introduce that sonata for us? Because this is not just by Brahms, right?
Sure. We're actually just playing the single movement that was written by Brahms, but this was a collaborative effort that also included Schumann as a birthday gift for Joseph Joachim, the famous violinist. Mm-hmm. And Joachim had a motto, free but lonely, and translated into the German and using the first letters of each of those words, you created a motive that was used in every one of these movements.
That's what the F.A.E. is.
That's what the F.A.E. is. And so Brahms created the scherzo for this, and one of the reasons is a really appropriate choice to play for something like this is you really hear the Beethovenian aspect of Brahms in this. Beethoven's Ghost is very strong, and including, I think, a very conscious reference to the 3 shorts and a long rhythm that begins the 5th symphony.
Okay. Well, sit back and relax. We have violinist Merwin Siu and Rachel Zeithamel performing at the piano, music of Johannes Brahms, here on Toledo Symphony Lab. That's music of Johannes Brahms. We heard a movement from the F.A.E. Sonata for violin and piano. Merwin Siu, who is from Toledo Symphony, along with Rachel Zeithamel at the piano, also from Toledo Symphony. We asked Rachel to come in today, but we couldn't find a pair of headphones for her, so she skipped out on us. That's okay.
She bailed.
Yeah, she'll be here in future episodes, and we had her talking about the education episode a few weeks back. But we haven't heard from Stewart Goodyear. I don't know. He's MIA, so maybe he wasn't able to call us this morning. But let's talk about Beethoven. Since we don't have Stewart here, we can talk about the Emperor Concerto. And who wants to start with that? Well, we got to start with Zach, because you're the one that voted for Beethoven at the
I guess I have to go defend Beethoven. I never thought you had to do this.
Celebrity Smackdown.
At Symphony Hall in Boston, they had all of these nameplates that were supposed to be filled with names of great composers. And the one thing that everybody could agree on is that Beethoven should be on the most prominent one directly above the middle of the stage. But what they couldn't agree on was anyone else. So I think that they're still empty to this day, which is kind of a neat design flaw for the perfect sound of Symphony Hall.
I think we should point out that when we're talking about defending Beethoven, we're not talking about defending Beethoven, the composer. We're talking about defending Beethoven, the pugilist, the fighter in a cage match.
Oh my God.
Right?
Yeah.
Right.
I want to get Felicia's take on this, because you're a marketing director. What if the TSO started like a whole line of action figures, and you did, Beethoven action figure, or you could commission these and sell them and market them. Maybe not for this Christmas, but for next Christmas, or, even better yet, Rock'em Sock'em Robots.
Well,
right?
I like how you say this as if we already haven't done it.
Have you done it?
No.
Are there Beethoven action figures out there?
We did just commission a set of greeting cards for the Toledo Symphony, and it's great because we worked with this wonderful local artist named Ed Kahn, and he would listen to the music of each of the composers that he was drawing, and he put together a Spotify playlist for each of them, and then that inspired the art that he created. And what he has for Beethoven is this crazy-haired caricature with this small face and this kind of thrust-out jaw, looking very intimidating. Yeah. And what he has for Brahms is this very rotund, white-bearded Brahms falling asleep in his armchair.
Like a weeble.
It's just his it's the lullaby. So you take what is most caricatured of these two composers, and I think that says a lot about the fierceness of Beethoven, even as an old man.
Oh, that's right. He's still defending Beethoven.
Right? I'm still in
Okay.
defense of Beethoven, the composer and pugilist. So pivoting over to Beethoven, over the weekend, I looked at my CDs to figure out where the Emperor Concerto falls in his composition. I always think of it as a later Beethoven work, but it's as Merwin alluded to at the beginning of this episode, it's something that falls right into the middle of his career. So he had just written the Fifth and Sixth Symphonies, he had just written his Ghost Trio, and he had just written Fidelio. So I would put Fidelio later in his career from the sounds of it, and I would put Emperor Concerto later. But I mean, if you think about some of the aspects of this concerto, there are points that fit very nicely with the Sixth Symphony, and in that late 60s and early 70s in the opus numbers. It's a concerto that I remember first discovering when I was a kid. My dad had this wonderful record collection, and he had Rudolf Serkin and Seiji Ozawa performing at Symphony Hall in Boston, the Emperor Concerto. And, from the beginning note, that you're in for a ride, because it just has this big exclamation point, followed by these just dazzling arpeggios in the piano. And you can almost imagine that the pianist has to be pretty terrified of the prospect of opening up this concerto, because all you have to go on is a single chord from the orchestra, and then you're in control of the tempo. The conductor might be counting rhythm in silence, but it's a cadenza immediately that falls in with these great chords that the orchestra comes back in on.
Yeah.
But if you haven't nailed the tempo in your own dazzling flourishes as a pianist, the rest of the concerto is going to seem either very fast or very slow. So a lot rests on the pianist's shoulders at this point. And the first movement it's long and it's dazzling, and it itself sounds like a self-contained piece. So you could just take that first movement and say it's a great concerto. But I will never tire of listening to the slow movement. The Adagio from the Emperor Concerto is one of my favorite works. Slow, low chords. One of the most melancholy strewn themes I can think of. It's happy, but it's also regretting something. And it's just so beautiful. In fact, when my wife was pregnant with my daughter, we would play her the slow movement from Beethoven's Emperor Concerto in utero through a pair of headphones. And you kind of hope that when you do this, you're going to trigger some sort of memory later in life where when she hears that slow movement of the Emperor Concerto, it'll just seem familiar to her.
It's sort of like the Manchurian Candidate.
Well, but a little more...
You just ruined.
A little more kind in its application.
You didn't train her to go, Yeah.
Angela Lansbury was not part of this, nor was Frank Sinatra for that. Although we did play her some Sinatra. Yeah. It's interesting because now that I think about it, the two pieces that we would routinely play for my daughter in utero were the slow movement from the Emperor Concerto and also Brahms' Lullaby. So it fits this Beethoven and Brahms thing as well.
So she's like the new generation, Brahms and Beethoven standing side by side.
Yeah, you don't need the cage match because they're intertwined in her development.
I always like when we sort of transcend where we were at the beginning of the podcast. When we
in this case, it was a pretty low bar to transcend.
That's true. Well, speaking of which, look at the time. That's about all the time that we have. Unfortunately, we didn't get to talk with Stewart Goodyear, but we are going to hear him play. He's going to be performing this weekend that Piano Concerto No. 5 of Beethoven, the Emperor Concerto, also Johannes Brahms, Symphony No. 2, wonderful concert conducted by Giordano Bellincampi. That's this Friday and Saturday, January 12 and 13 at 8 o'clock p.m. at the Toledo Museum of Art Peristyle. Tickets at 419-246-8000 or ToledoSymphony.com. Toledo Symphony Lab is generously underwritten by a gift from the estate of Barbara Garwood and is a production of WGTE Public Media in collaboration with our sponsor, the Toledo Symphony. You can download episodes of this program as a podcast by going to our website at WGTE.org. My thanks to Zach Vassar, Merwin Siu, and Felicia Canny. I'm Brad Cresswell, and you've been listening to Toledo Symphony Lab here on FM 91.